Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Karistian Amnpour in London. We begin tonight in Israel, where a controversial new nation-state law has drawn rare criticism from the influential Jewish federations of North America, which says it is a step back for all minorities. In Israel, protests against the law, which was pushed through by the Netanyahu government in a stormy session of the Knesset, are planned for this weekend. Now, supporters of the new law say that it simply enshrines Israel as the national home of the Jewish people. But, as critics point out, it also says the right to exercise national self-determination is unique to the Jewish people. Israeli Arabs and left-wing MPs tore up the bill in protest after the vote. Now, in 1948, Israel's Declaration of Independence, which enshrined the country as a beacon of democracy in the Middle East, promised complete social and political equality for all citizens. That is a quote, regardless of religion. Indeed, Israel's founding Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, warned the nation had to withdraw from the occupied territories after the Six-Day War or watch their young state descend into conflict between democracy and pluralism or identity. Now, all these years later, the still occupied West Bank, the lack of a peace process, has proven Ben-Gurion's prophecy. And joining me to discuss is Tamar Zandberg. She's a member of the Knesset and she's leader of the left-wing Meretz party, which is petitioning Israel's High Court to overturn the law. And we had hoped to have a proponent of the bill here to debate the issue. We invited almost a dozen senior officials to appear on the program with Tamar. None would do so. So, Ms. Zandberg, welcome to the program. Now, why are you petitioning the High Court? After all, as the proponents say, there's nothing out of the ordinary in this bill. It simply enshrines the right of the Jewish people.
You know, the right of the Jewish people to its own homeland after the tragedy of the Jewish people, really the worst in human history, was promised in the Declaration of Independence that you quoted very rightly in your opening remark. We lived 70 years here under the premise of a Jewish homeland and, in the same time, a democracy that promises, first of all, equality to all its citizens, regardless of race, religion, or gender, like the very beautifully written Declaration of Independence stated. And now, 70 years later, when we are much stronger than we were when this Declaration of Independence was read by our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, the Netanyahu government, for the first time in the history, not only of the Israeli democracy, but also of any democracy in the world, anchors inequality and discrimination in a constitutional law. And I don't know if you know, but Israel does not have a constitution.
Yes.
We have a series of basic laws which together complete some kind of constitutional principles. And here, there, instead of equality, they anchor discriminatory principles. And that is a shame not only to Israeli minorities, like the Arab minority, the Druze minority that protests against this law, LGBT, women, Jewish streams other than the ultra-Orthodox, but also any Israeli that cares for equality and sees in it a basic principle of the democratic system that is now being broken by the Netanyahu government.
Let me play then to you what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said about this law as it was being pushed through the Knesset.
This is a defining moment in the annals of Zionism and the history of the State of Israel. We will keep ensuring civil rights in Israel's democracy. These rights will not be harmed, but the majority also has rights, and the majority decides. An absolute majority wants to ensure our state's Jewish character for generations to come.
So he's kind of having his cake and eating it too, saying that absolutely civil rights will be enshrined, will be respected for all, and yet the majority decides. I mean, I guess what I want to know is, where do you think you can go with this? Because it looks to be, according to polls, that a majority of Israelis do believe that when it comes to choice between democracy and identity, these days anyway, they're choosing identity. They're siding with identity.
You know, the mere founding principle of the Zionist movement that seek to ensure the homeland for the Jewish people was that there is no contradiction between identity and building the homeland for the Jewish people and between ensuring democracy and equality for all. You know, the majority decides is one principle of democracy. Other very important principles are also defense for minorities. This is what keeps us together. And when the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1948, it was signed in a wide consensus between ultra-Orthodox and communists. Everybody joined this beautiful text that defined our identity here till this day. Mm-hmm. And today, Benjamin Netanyahu, unfortunately, together with his extreme conservative right-wing partners, signed some kind of a political deal between themselves, defining the identity for all of us. And it's no wonder that a huge part of Israelis go out and protest, whether it's the Druze minority, LGBT rights activists. And many of us feel really hurt, insulted by this law that, in a way, we feel that intentionally this government was about to make it a point to hurt minorities and to go against many of rulings of the Supreme Court, for example, that during the years ensured equality and put it as a profound principle of the Israeli democracy. And this comes after some years of this government legislating a series of laws, starting from NGO law, boycott law, a series of laws threatened or aimed to narrow the democratic space of Israel and stress the nationalistic character over the democratic one.
So I want you just very briefly, for viewers who may not fully understand the actual points, because many of the supporters and many analysts are saying, okay, you know, this is really about words, and as you say, potentially a political deal, a political ploy ahead of potential elections. What will it actually change?
Well, actually, there are two main points here. One is the general spirit, even I would say, the atmosphere of this law. Taking the beautiful Declaration of Independence and replacing it with not a very eloquent, not a very elegant text that is supposed to be a constitutional principle, really, you know, to the best part, unnecessary. But the others are specific clauses in the law that truly hurt equality. One, for example, is the one ensures the supremacy of Jewish settlement, of Jewish inhabitants over the equality and promising the same rights to everyone, including minorities. The other is, for example, downloading the status of the Arab language that used to be a formal language alongside with the Hebrew. And now the Hebrew, only Hebrew, is being anchored as a formal language, actually pushing down in what is being seen as humiliation for the Arab minority in Israel. It also hurts the Jewish pluralism, ensuring, you know, for example, Reform and conservative Jews that are a minority in Israel, but a majority in the world Jewry, in the Jewish communities around the world, that feel now less welcome here. And many others.
So let me quote to you your Justice Minister. She said in February of this year in a speech, she basically said, there are places where the character of the state of Israel as a Jewish state must be maintained. And this sometimes comes at the expense of equality. So it does actually look like she is agreeing with what you know, the critic is saying, although she is a proponent of this law. But let me ask you, for instance, to respond to some of your critics, people like the tourism minister who has said in the Times, tell us honestly, and he's talking about, you know, many other people, he's addressing actually the Labour Party, do you contest the Jewish people's right to the land of Israel? Is it not our nation state? Is its flag not acceptable to you? There's never been such rejection by the Labour movement of Zionist values. What do you say to that? Because obviously, I mean, I know you're not the Labour government, the Labour Party, but nonetheless.
Yes, I think this is a total misunderstanding, and I say that, you know, to the least, and I think this is also an intentional attack and attempt of delegitimization of the liberal community in Israel, those who seek equality and see that as not contradictory to the principle of Jewish and national homeland. And I think any one of us living in a liberal democracy, whether that would be the US, France, or any European or other country around the world, know that the fact that we have national identity we are proud of is not in contradiction to our democracy and ensuring rights and equality also to the minorities.
Yeah.
And I think this is a break in the principles of the Israeli democracy, shifting in and drifting away from a liberal democracy to being more like trends that we see around the world now, trying to narrow the democratic space for other principles that are less, that would like to see us less of a democracy that ensures equality.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because actually this law was pushed through on the very day that Viktor Orban was welcomed in Israel by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And he calls his own country, by his own admission, illiberal democracy. And there has been some ugly anti-Semitism in that country as well, with the Soros law and all these other issues. And I'm wondering if you can expand on whether you think really that Israel, which has stood as a beacon for democracy for all its history, is at risk right now. And particularly, one of the sponsors, Avi Dichter, has said this is also a response to Arabs, both Israeli citizens and those living in the West Bank, who believe that Israel would one day become a binational state of all its people.
Well, first of all, I have to stress that I was among those rejected Orban's visit, and also the agreement between Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Prime Minister of Poland actually giving legitimacy to pure anti-Semitism, that Poland is trying to clear itself from the Nazi crimes, and in the same time, twisting history the way that Israel truly cares about the history of the Holocaust and of our people in Europe. I believe that both Avi Dichter and another David Bitan, another senior member of Netanyahu's coalition, explicitly say that one of the goals of this law, one of their aims, is to stop, as they say, the spread of the non-Jewish inhabitants, the non-Jewish settlements in the Negev, one of the places in Israel where Jews and Arabs live together and practice mutual life and coexistence. And these are Israeli citizens, being Jewish and non-Jewish. And this is a real danger. And vis-a-vis the Palestinian population in the West Bank, surely the way to ensure the sustainability of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state is creating the two-state solution that we seek for so badly.
All right.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, unfortunately, constantly refuses to implement.
And we will keep watching that. Tamar Zandberg, thank you so much, head of the Meretz party. Now